What happens when two of the most talked about women in the world sit down for what was supposed to be a friendly chat, but instead turns into one of the most explosive interviews ever caught on camera? You're about to find out, and trust me, you won't believe where this goes. But before we get into it, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me whose side you're on after you hear what went down. So picture this. Kim Kardashian had been planning this interview for months. Her team reached out to Meghan Markle's people with what seemed like a straightforward pitch, a candid conversation between two women who understood what it meant to live under the microscope, to be constantly judged, to have every move dissected by millions. The setup was perfect. An intimate studio in Los Angeles. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs positioned just close enough to feel personal but not invasive. Kim's production team had done this 1,000 times before. They knew how to make guests feel at ease, how to create an environment where real conversation could happen. Meghan arrived exactly on time, which Kim's team noted approvingly. She was dressed elegantly, but not overly formal, projecting exactly the image she'd cultivated since stepping back from royal duties, poised, confident, independent. The two women exchanged pleasantries as makeup artists did final touch-ups. Small talk about the weather, about Los Angeles traffic, about nothing particularly meaningful. But anyone paying close attention might have noticed something in the air. A certain tension that neither woman acknowledged but both seemed to feel when the camera started rolling. Kim opened with her signature warmth. "Meghan, thank you so much for being here. I've been looking forward to this conversation because I think there's so much we can relate to in each other's experiences. We've both built our lives in the public eye. We've both faced incredible scrutiny. And we've both had to make really difficult decisions about our families and our futures." Meghan smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you for having me, Kim. Though I have to say I'm curious about the comparison you just made. Our experiences are quite different, wouldn't you say?" Kim's expression flickered for just a moment, surprised by the slight edge in Meghan's tone, but she recovered quickly. "Well, sure, every person's journey is unique, but there are similarities. We've both had to deal with constant media attention, with people making assumptions about who we are based on headlines and gossip. We've both had our relationships analyzed and criticized. I thought that common ground would make for an interesting discussion." Meghan leaned forward slightly, her posture shifting from relaxed to engaged, or perhaps ready for confrontation. Common ground. That's an interesting phrase. Kim, your family built an empire by inviting cameras into your lives, by sharing everything, by making your private moments public entertainment. That was a choice, a business decision, and clearly a very successful one. My situation was rather different. One married into an institution that's existed for over 1,000 years, with rules and protocols and expectations that I had no hand in creating, and when that institution and the media that covers it became unbearable, when it threatened my mental health and my family's safety, I made the choice to step away. Those aren't really comparable circumstances, are they? The studio suddenly felt smaller. Kim's team exchanged glances behind the cameras, unsure whether to be concerned or excited about the direction this was taking. Kim herself sat up straighter, her media-trained composure holding firm, but her voice carried a new sharpness. "I understand that you faced unique challenges, Meghan. I'm not trying to diminish that. But you're acting as if choosing to be in the public eye somehow invalidates the real struggles that come with it. Do you think the hate I've received over the years hurt any less because I chose this life? Do you think the threats against my children matter less because their grandmother decided to film a reality show?" "Now, we're getting somewhere," Meghan responded, her accent seeming to shift slightly, becoming more pronounced as her emotions engaged. "Let's talk about choices then. You've made a career, a billion-dollar career in fact, out of selling products, promoting brands, and yes, sharing your life story. When you do an interview, when you speak your truth, as you like to call it, there's a clear commercial benefit. When I sat down and talked about my experiences with racism within the royal family, about being suicidal and being denied help, about the systematic destruction of my character by palace communications staff working with tabloid journalists, I wasn't selling anything. I was trying to survive. I was trying to protect my son and my husband from the same toxic cycle that claimed his mother's life. So please, don't act as if we're in the same business just because we both know what it's like to have paparazzi. Follow us." Kim's jaw tightened visibly. She took a breath, clearly trying to maintain her composure, but the friendly interviewer mask was slipping. "You know what, Meghan? I was really hoping we could have an honest conversation, but you walked in here with an agenda. You want to position yourself as some kind of victim who's above all of this. But let's be real for a second. You did a primetime interview with Oprah that was watched by 50 million people. You and Harry signed deals with Netflix and Spotify worth over $100 million. You wrote a children's book. You're literally doing a podcast where you talk about your life. So forgive me for being confused about how you're not also making money and building a brand from sharing your story." There was a long pause. Meghan's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing slightly as she processed Kim's words. The soft lighting that was meant to make everyone look their best now seemed to cast shadows that emphasized the growing hostility between them. When Meghan spoke again, her voice was quieter, more controlled, which somehow made it more cutting. "The difference, Kim, and I really need you to understand this, is intention and truth. Everything I've shared has been in response to years of lies and distortions. The British tabloids literally published false stories about me almost daily for years. They said I made Kate cry when the opposite was true. They said I was demanding and difficult when I was being silenced and controlled. They questioned my son's legitimacy, his place in the line of succession, using barely coded racist language. So yes, when given the opportunity to finally speak without being filtered through palace communications or misquoted by tabloid journalists, I took it. And yes, when companies approached us offering partnerships that aligned with our values and would allow us to actually make a living after being cut off financially, we accepted. But none of it, compares to building your entire existence around publicity." Kim laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. It was sharp and incredulous. "This is unbelievable. You're really going to sit here and lecture me about authenticity? About truth? Meghan, you and Harry complained about invasion of privacy while literally filming a docuseries about your lives. You talk about wanting to protect your children while putting them in that documentary, while using their titles when it's convenient. You left Britain claiming you wanted a quiet, private life, and you ended up in California doing the exact same thing you criticized the royals for, just with better PR." Meghan's composure cracked just slightly, but enough to be noticeable. Her voice rose, losing some of that careful control she'd maintained. "You don't understand anything about what we went through. You can't possibly understand. The docuseries wasn't about publicity. It was about correcting the record, about showing the truth of what happened to us. Because the narrative was being completely controlled by people who wanted to destroy us. And my children, don't you dare bring my children into this. Everything Harry and I have done has been to give them a better life than what he had, to break cycles of trauma and pain. We shared what we needed to share to reclaim our story." Kim leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs, a gesture that somehow conveyed both defensiveness and defiance. "Reclaim your story, correct the record, protect your truth. You have all these beautiful phrases for what is essentially the same thing my family does. We just don't pretend it's something noble. We're entertainers, we're entrepreneurs, we're public figures, and we own that. But you want to have it both ways. You want the platform, the deals, the influence, the ability to speak to millions. But you also want to be seen as some kind of martyr who was forced into all of this. That's what bothers me. The lack of honesty about what this really is." For a moment, it seemed like Meghan might stand up and leave. Her hands gripped the arms of her chair. Her breathing had quickened, and the careful mask of royal composure she'd worn for years was almost completely gone. But instead of leaving, she leaned forward, her voice dropping to something almost dangerously quiet. "You want to talk about honesty, Kim? Let's be completely honest then. You're upset because for years, you and your family have dominated the conversation about women in media, about building brands, about leveraging fame. And then I came along, someone with an actual platform for change, someone with a story that matters beyond lip fillers and fashion lines, and suddenly the conversation shifted. Suddenly, people were interested in something more substantial than what you've been selling. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You're threatened that the accusation hung in the air like smoke." Kim's face flushed, anger now clearly visible despite years of training in maintaining composure for cameras. She uncrossed her legs and leaned forward, matching Meghan's posture, bringing them almost face to face. "Threatened by you. Meghan, my family has built an empire that's lasted nearly 2 decades. We've created successful businesses. We've influenced fashion and beauty industries. We've stayed relevant through multiple generations of celebrities coming and going. You married a prince and then left. And now you're trying to build a career off of complaining about the institution you married into. Our situations aren't even in the same universe. So no, I'm not threatened. I'm annoyed that you've somehow convinced people that you're doing something different, or better, when you're literally just doing what everyone in Hollywood does. Selling your story, except you act superior about it. Meghan's laugh was bitter. There it is. That's what I was waiting for. You're annoyed. You know what annoyed me, Kim? Being told by palace staff that I needed to be quiet about the racism I was experiencing because it might embarrass the institution. Being told that my mental health didn't matter as much as protecting the brand of the monarchy. Watching my husband have to choose between his family and his wife because his family wouldn't stand up for us. That's annoyance. What you're feeling is ego. Your ego is hurt because not everything is about you and your family anymore. Kim stood up abruptly, though the cameras kept rolling, the producers having decided to let this play out. When she spoke, her voice was shaking slightly. Whether from anger or something else was hard to tell. My ego, you flew across the ocean to sit in this chair and do this interview. My team reached out to yours, yes, but you said yes. You could have declined. You could have said no to coming on a platform that, according to you, represents everything shallow and commercial. But you didn't, because you need this too. You need the audience. You need the relevance. You need people to keep caring about your story. So don't stand on some moral high ground acting like you're above all this, when you're right here in the middle of it with the rest of us. Meghan stood as well. The two women, now facing each other across the small space between their chairs. You think I need this? I've given speeches at the United Nations. I've worked with organizations fighting for women's rights and social justice since before most people knew who I was. I don't need your platform, Kim. I came here because I thought, foolishly apparently, that we might actually have a real conversation about the pressures women face, about motherhood in the public eye, about the impossible standards we're all held to. But instead, you've made this about competition, about who's more authentic or successful or whatever metric you're using to measure worth. Kim's voice rose to match Meghan's volume. You're the one who came in here with an attitude from the first question. You're the one who started making comparisons, who started judging my family's choices, who decided that your suffering matters more than anyone else's. I've been trying to have a conversation, but you don't want conversation. You want validation. You want me to sit here and agree that you're special, that what you went through was uniquely terrible, that you're somehow more noble than everyone else, trying to make it in this industry. That industry, Meghan shot back, is exactly the problem. I'm not in an industry. I'm not a product. I'm not a brand. I'm a person who tried to serve an institution, who tried to modernize and bring positive change, and who was systematically destroyed for it. The British press and the Palace Communications Office worked together to paint me as everything from a social climber to a manipulator to a bad influence on Harry. They questioned whether my son should be a prince, whether he deserves security, and the reasons they questioned those things were racist, plain and simple. So excuse me if I don't see my life as equivalent to someone who became famous from a reality show and a leaked tape. The moment those last words left Meghan's mouth, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Kim went very still, her expression transforming into something cold and hard. Several of her team members behind the cameras visibly tensed, knowing that a line had just been crossed. When Kim spoke again, her voice was measured but lethal. So we're going there now. You want to bring up the lowest moment of my life, something that happened when I was young, something that was used to humiliate and objectify me, something I've had to live with and work to overcome for 20 years. That's the level you want to take this to. I thought you were supposed to be about supporting women, about understanding trauma, about compassion. Meghan's expression flickered, perhaps recognizing she'd gone too far, but she didn't back down. I'm just pointing out that we all have pasts. We all have things we're not proud of. We all have moments we wish we could change. The difference is context and growth. I'm not trying to hurt you, Kim. I'm trying to make you understand that not all public scrutiny is the same. Not all challenges are equal, and some of us have faced things that go beyond embarrassment or invasion of privacy. Some of us have faced actual danger, actual threats to our lives and our children's lives. Kim took a step closer, her voice quiet but intense. You don't think I've faced danger? You don't think my family has dealt with threats? I was held at gunpoint in Paris and robbed of millions of dollars worth of jewelry. I've had stalkers. I've had people threaten my children. My husband has dealt with mental health crises in the most public way possible. My father, despite all our complicated history, had very real health issues that played out for everyone to see and judge. So don't tell me I don't understand fear or danger or protecting my family. The difference is, I don't use those experiences to claim I'm better than other people who've also suffered. Meghan's hands were trembling now, whether from anger or emotion or both. Her voice cracked slightly as she responded. I have never claimed to be better than anyone. What I have claimed, what I have fought for, is the right to tell my own story without being silenced. You keep framing this as if I'm seeking attention or playing victim. But what you're really saying is that I should have stayed quiet, that I should have endured the racism, the lies, the coordinated campaign against me, and just smiled through it because speaking up makes people uncomfortable. That's what you're really angry about, isn't it? That I refused to play the role everyone wanted me to play. Kim shook her head slowly, frustration evident in every movement. No, Meghan. What I'm saying is that you act like you're the only person who's ever had to fight back against a false narrative. My family has been defending ourselves against lies and criticism for almost 20 years. We've had people question our talent, our work ethic, our right to success. We've been called every name imaginable. But we kept building, kept working, kept pushing forward. And yes, we did it publicly. We did it through our show and our businesses and our social media. That was our choice and our strategy. What bothers me is that you want all the benefits of public advocacy and public platforms without any of the criticism or questioning that comes with it. You want to control the narrative completely. That is not true. I have accepted criticism. What I haven't accepted is racism being disguised as criticism. I haven't accepted coordinated smear campaigns being treated as legitimate journalism. There's a difference between someone not liking me or disagreeing with my choices, and a system designed to tear me down because I didn't fit the mold. Because I challenged things because of the color of my skin. And the fact that you can't or won't see that difference is exactly why we're having this argument right now. Kim threw her hands up in exasperation. Everything comes back to that for you. Every critique, every question, every disagreement gets labeled as racism or institutional oppression. And maybe some of it was. I'm not denying that racism exists, or that you probably faced it. But not everything is about that. Sometimes people just don't like you, Meghan. Sometimes people question your motives or your decisions because they genuinely disagree, not because of some grand conspiracy. And you hide behind very real issues of racism and mental health to avoid taking any responsibility for the role. You played in your own situation. The silence that followed was deafening. Meghan stared at Kim with an expression that mixed disbelief, fury, and something that looked almost like hurt. When she finally spoke, her voice was dangerously quiet. The role I played in my own situation? You mean marrying someone I loved? You mean trying to do my job despite being given no support or training? You mean having a baby and suffering through postpartum depression while being attacked daily by the media? Tell me, Kim, what exactly should I have done differently? Should I have smiled more? Should I have ignored the articles calling my son offensive names? Should I have just accepted that the palace was actively briefing against me to make other members of the family look better? Kim's response was immediate and heated. Maybe you should have tried harder to make it work before running to America and burning every bridge behind you. Maybe you should have given it more than 2 years before deciding the whole institution was irredeemable. Maybe you should have considered that Harry's family, despite their flaws, also lost someone they loved in Diana, and that they might have their own trauma and their own complicated feelings about watching him marry someone and then leave everything behind. Did you ever think about that? Did you ever consider anyone's perspective besides your own? Meghan's face had gone pale, her eyes bright with unshed tears that she was clearly fighting to hold back. How dare you? How dare you use Diana's memory like that, like some kind of weapon against me? Harry and I have been nothing but respectful about his mother, about what she went through, about the parallels to our own situation. And his family, the family you're defending, they did nothing to protect Diana either. They let her be hounded and harassed and destroyed by the same system that came after me. So don't lecture me about considering their feelings. When they showed absolutely no consideration for hours, Kim's voice took on a mocking edge. "Oh, here we go. Now you're Diana." "That's perfect. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You can't just be Meghan, who had a hard time and made some choices. You have to be this tragic figure, this martyr, this woman who suffered more than anyone else. Do you know how many people have difficult in-laws? How many people struggle with their partner's family? How many people feel misunderstood or unsupported? Millions. But they don't get to do international interviews about it and get paid millions of dollars and then act like they're doing everyone a favor by sharing their pain." Meghan took a step back, visibly trying to compose herself to regain some control over the situation. "This conversation is pointless. You're determined to misunderstand everything I'm saying, to reduce legitimate trauma to family drama, to pretend that institutional racism and media collusion is the same as normal relationship problems. I don't know why I expected anything different. You've built your entire life on superficiality, on appearances, on selling an image. You're not capable of understanding depth or nuance or complexity." "And there it is," Kim said, her voice sharp with vindication. "The real Meghan, the one who thinks she's smarter than everyone else, more enlightened, more aware. You look down on people like me, on what my family does, on the entertainment industry, on popular culture. You think you're intellectual and important, and that we're all just shallow celebrities playing dress-up. But you know what? At least we're honest about what we are. At least we don't pretend to be activists and humanitarians while doing the exact same thing, seeking fame and fortune that everyone else in Hollywood does." Meghan's composure finally shattered completely. Her voice broke as she spoke, tears now visible in her eyes, though none fell. "I wanted to die, Kim. Do you understand that? I told Harry I didn't want to be alive anymore. I asked the institution for help, for someone to talk to, for some kind of support, and I was told it wouldn't be good for the optics. That's not about fame or fortune or celebrity. That's about survival. And if you can't see the difference, if you honestly believe that my speaking about that is the same as your family's reality show, then you're not just wrong, you're cruel." Kim's expression shifted slightly, some of the anger seeming to drain away, replaced by something harder to read. "Look, I'm sorry you felt that way. I'm sorry you were in that much pain. Mental health struggles are real and they're serious. But Meghan, you're using that very real pain to shut down any criticism, any questions, any conversation that doesn't go exactly how you want it to go. You came on this show knowing I would ask tough questions, knowing we might not agree on everything. And the second I pushed back even a little, you went straight to the most extreme examples of your suffering to make me look heartless. That's manipulation, whether you want to admit it or not. It's not manipulation to set boundaries," Meghan shot back, her voice still thick with emotion, but growing stronger. "It's not manipulation to say that some things are off limits, that some experiences are too painful or too serious to be treated as just another talking point. You want to have a debate, you want to score points, you want to win the argument. I wanted to have a conversation about real issues, about the pressure women face, about the intersection of fame and mental health and family. Those are two completely different things." Kim sat back down in her chair, the fight seeming to go out of her suddenly. She looked tired, frustrated, and maybe even a little sad. "I don't think we can have the conversation you wanted, Meghan. I don't think it's possible because we're coming from such different places, with such different experiences, with such different ways of seeing the world. You think I'm shallow, and I think you're self-righteous. You think your suffering is special, and I think it's being used strategically. Neither of us is going to convince the other, so what's the point of continuing this?" Meghan remained standing, looking down at Kim with an expression that mixed pity and disappointment. The point would have been connection. The point would have been to women finding common ground, despite their differences. The point would have been showing that we can disagree without tearing each other down. But you're right, that's not going to happen here. Not today, maybe not ever. "I think we're done." Kim looked up at her, and for just a moment, something flickered across her face that might have been regret. Maybe we are. But for what it's worth, I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. I hope all the interviews and the deals and the documentaries give you the peace or the vindication or whatever you need. "I really do." Meghan didn't respond. She simply turned and walked toward the door, her posture straight, her head high, every inch the duchess she'd once been. The crew scrambled to figure out whether to keep filming, whether this was still part of the interview or if it was over. Asterisk. So, what do you think? Was Meghan right to call out Kim's privilege and question her authenticity? Or was Kim justified in pushing back against what she saw as Meghan's victim mentality?